Hey guys, James Abrenio here on Abrenio Law's podcast. Let me just pop up our information there for you. So, website, phone number, email address if you need to get in touch with us. Today, I thought we'd do something a little bit different, but I think even more informative than a lot of things that we've done. I've actually asked my paralegal, my work wife, so to speak, my right hand woman, to come here today and share some interesting knowledge. Relatively recently, she was asked and subpoenaed or summoned to be a juror. Now, for sake of this discussion, I'm not trying to identify any particular attorney, any particular case. Unless you know Sharon, you don't know what county she lives in. I can just tell you it was in Northern Virginia, and it was in a relatively recent past. But my goal is not for you to look up a case and see how it went. It's really the goal here is to get Sharon's perspective and her viewpoint. So for you practicing attorneys, you attorneys, young attorneys looking to try cases, I think seeing her viewpoints from a potential juror's perspective is useful. So first of all, Sharon, introduce yourself and how long you've been working with us.
I'm Sharon Brown, and I've known James for a long time, but I've been working with him at Abrenio Law for the past 3 years, and it has been absolutely wonderful, great experience. I'm learning a lot, and I hope that what we're going to tell you guys today will help you guys out a lot.
Yeah, and first of all, I appreciate it, but we both know it's not been perfect and it's been hard and I'm annoying. So that's all good.
Perfect imperfections.
Yeah, but Sharon, tell just so people are aware of your background, like what have you been doing for the firm? What do you do on a day-to-day level? And then also talk about how you've helped me out at trials.
Okay, so as most of you know, James is primarily a personal injury attorney. He does criminal work also. So my main job is you guys, a client calls in, potential client calls in. I talk to them on the phone, get a lot of background information about what happened, what county, the extent of the injuries and this type of thing. And I usually set them up with a phone call with James, and then James goes into more detail based on the notes that I've taken and gotten to him. And then once he signs this client or says, hey, we're taking this case, then we start getting medical records and getting police reports. I don't do a lot of the police report stuff. That's stuff that James does. But I do get the medical records, the medical billing, get all that organized so that when it's time for James to start his part of the claim, everything's theirs in order for him to work and be able to work smoothly. That's the goal, for
Yeah.
him to be able to work smoothly once all the records are in.
Yeah, and I appreciate it. Certainly, I couldn't survive without you. But also for people watching, Sharon doesn't just help me kind of build PI cases. Whenever I have interesting legal issues that I think I need to present to a jury, I will oftentimes get her opinion as kind of a lay juror. I will also have her come to court with me as I'm doing jury selection, closing, cross-examination. I'm oftentimes looking to her to say, hey, look, am I missing something? I'll have her watch the jurors and to see if there's something I should be looking for, if I'm something missing, those kinds of things. So very practical stuff. So I appreciate the help. You also have a
Well,
background. You've worked at a
and
prosecutor.
another set of ears too, because a lot of times I've noticed that you're totally involved, and
Yeah.
you not often, but sometimes you may miss something that was said. I say, hey, did you hear that?
Yeah.
That kind of thing, just to make sure. Take a lot of notes of things I see, just to make sure that you don't miss anything.
Yeah. And also to give more context to your potential juror service, you also worked for a prosecutor down in Charlotte, right?
In
Not
no, South
Charlotte,
Carolina.
North Carolina. Sorry, North
Hmm.
Carolina. Tell a little bit about that background, just so everybody kind of understands that.
Well, I actually work for the circuit solicitor in the circuit solicitor's office in county in South Carolina. I'm not going to mention it just
Yeah.
because. And what I did was, this was an office of prosecutors. And
Mhm.
so what we did, just like the county attorney's office here, we prosecuted cases.
Mhm.
I got a lot of learning on the job training with that because my direct boss tried the big cases. He's the elected official. So a lot of times I didn't do a lot of the prep work for him, but I would go to court, kind of listen, and we would sit back after that and just powwow. What did you hear? What did you think? This kind of thing. So it really tuned me into listening, not to the big facts, but listening to the undertones that were said or the way something was said and this kind of thing. Because unbeknownst to a lot of lay people, it's not a lot of times what you say, but it's also could be how you say it. I would say, James, they didn't sound too confident when they said that, and then I've noticed you would jump up and say, hey, let me ask you this again, or let me ask you this way to get a little clearer understanding. So that's a lot of what I did in the circuit solicitor's office, along with a lot of paperwork.
Well, and it's fair to say that before you got your juror summons, you were not new to jury work. You were not new to jury trials.
Correct.
Okay. So, and you understand how important the jury system is for both the civil and criminal side, obviously.
Yes, I do.
So with that being said, you get a jury summons in the mail. What's first going on through your mind?
Since this is a family show, I just said, oh boy. And the first thing you do when you see it is obvious when you get it, because it says the circuit court of the county, and it says the jury division or the juror, whatever's on the return address. And so in my case, I'm walking from my mailbox and I'm opening this saying when, because now at the point when I got my letter, this was mid-November. And the first thing that came into my mind, I'm going to be sitting on the jury the week before Christmas.
Okay. So obviously timing matters, right?
Yes, timing does matter.
Did you think through your mind anything you could do to avoid jury service?
To be honest, yes. And I think that it's just that it's this human nature to say, I don't want to do this. But, when you sit back and you think about it, I've been on both sides of that podium. And so when you sit back, you start thinking, this is pretty darn important. And so then your whole tone changes. Okay, I'm going to do this. But the first thing that pops in your mind is work. I immediately came into the house and I looked on your calendar to see, okay, this is my date that I'm supposed to be. Does James have court this week and where? And that was the first thing that I checked, and I checked my personal calendar to see what was, if there's any type of conflicts, which there was.
Yeah. And what kind did it take a lot of reorganization, both either or when it comes to work or personal life to make sure you're ready to have the time needed for the service?
At this time in my life, it didn't, because I don't have young children. It's just my husband and me at home. So it's very easy to change things. However, our grandson was coming to stay with us, and it was going to be on day 4 of me serving on the jury. My husband was great. He said, I'll work from home, take care of him so that you can go. When I spoke with you, it was like, hey, cool, that's awesome. It's what you said about me serving on the jury, and go for it. But I will tell you that the judge emphasized several times that do not fear, don't have a worry, I guess, of losing your job, because that is something that is a given, that employers cannot fire you or reprimand you or punish you for serving on the jury.
Well, despite that, the judge saying that, and maybe this doesn't apply to you because obviously working with me, I would want you to serve, if nothing else, because it's interesting, but also I understand how important it is. Do you know if anybody that you spoke to directly or heard them talking about other jurors that were still concerned about losing their job or still concerned about employment?
Yes, as a matter of fact, there was a young lady that was actually seated on the jury, and she raised her hand and asked to be excused, which we'll get into later about being excused from jury duty. And she was concerned because she had just started a job a month ago, and she's still on a trial basis for this job. They're still training. She's very concerned. And the judge told her right then, hey, you don't have to worry about that. You cannot be fired for jury duty or reprimanded. What they do have, they have an excuse that you can pull up online. You enter your juror number in the prompt, and it will print off a letter for you from your court, especially this court that I was in. That's how it worked. That said you had jury duty these days, and you can present that to your employer. And the woman, she seemed to be at ease, and the judge kind of read her body language a little and said, you know what, we have a big enough pool. I'm gonna excuse you.
Okay.
And so that came to the judge. He excused her because she did seem rather antsy, so to speak, about missing work.
Okay. Now, I kind of want to fast forward to when you're making your way to the courthouse that morning. Now, you've been to all the courthouses around here pretty regularly,
Yes.
security checks and all that kind of stuff, and where to park. So that's not, I imagine, in your mind. But anything going through your mind about getting there on time? What time do they want you there? And did you observe anybody else and struggles they were having?
Well, your letter would tell you that they want you there at 8:15.
Okay.
The court's open at 8 a.m. and they want you in the jury room at 8:15. So you need to really keep that in mind. It's a Monday morning in a circuit court building. There were drones of people everywhere. You just see them coming from everywhere. Now, I know where to park. And so parking was really not an issue for me, but there are parking garages that you can park, everywhere. It may not be right there at the courthouse, but it's within walking distance. So parking is not a huge issue, but you need to get there in time because in all courthouses, you have to go through security. And everyone is going through security. You have the jurors, you have the attorneys, you have people coming to just file things, and you actually have defendants going through also that may not be in jail, but maybe on house arrest. And so you have all these people coming through. So security would take the most time. And one of the things that I can say is treat going through the courthouse like you're treat going through security at the courthouse the same way you would an airport. Just be prepared. Have your phone, ready to put your phone in. Your watch, if you have a smartwatch. Well, it doesn't matter. They want your watch in their smartwatch or not. Take your belt off. If you wear heavy silver jewelry, take that off. Just put it in the bin. To get through security pretty well. If you wear boots, be careful. Your boots have steel plates in them or the steel heels. You're going to get stopped. You're going to have to take your shoes off. And so those kind of things can slow you up. So if you wait until 10 after 8, to be in the security line, chances are you're going to be late.
Did you see any other prospective jurors going through the line? And did you see or hear any distress they were having?
I did see prospective jurors, and the only way I knew they were prospective jurors were they were holding the blue letter in their hand. And they were constantly reading, where do I go? Where do I go? And you could see a little anxiety, and especially the way they were walking, like hurrying to get there, and asking questions, which way do I go? Which way do I go? It didn't bother me as much. I said, okay, hey, I'm going to get there. But there are plenty of signs everywhere, and there are plenty of people in these courtrooms to help you get where you need to go, especially when they see that blue letter. It's almost like your golden ticket. They see that letter, oh, let me help you. This is where you need to go.
When you get up to the juror room, how long are you waiting in there before you get called in the court?
Can I back up just a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so once you come into the courtroom, you find the jury room. You're going to walk up to a counter. They are going to ask for, at this particular court, they ask for your government issued ID and your letter.
Mhm.
and they match that number on your letter with your address, that number on the letter with your name on the list that they have.
Mhm.
And they say, okay, and then they hand you a lanyard and they ask if you parked. And if you said yes, they have a little machine there. You stick your ticket in the machine and it barcodes it so your parking is paid for.
Mhm.
And then they tell you go to the right. There's a room, huge room with a lot of tables and chairs, and you just sit there
Mhm.
and you wait. And we probably waited 2.5 to 3 hours before anything happened.
During that 2 to 3 hours, is anybody talking to each other?
Yes, people, amazingly, there are quite a few people that knew each other.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And so, they started talking, and then someone would say, hey, is this your first time serving on a jury? And that would start a conversation. There were conversations being had. A lot of people were just sitting around drinking their coffee, reading their paper on their iPads or their phones or reading a book.
Is the court asking you to do anything during this 2 or 3 hour wait period, or are you just sitting there?
Well, at first we just sat there for the first hour and a half, maybe hour 45. And I knew what was going on, but the other people didn't know what was going on. I knew that there were discussions being made in the courtroom, administrative time in the courtroom. I knew this because I've been on that side of it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you just sat there, and then a representative from the clerk's office came in and said, welcome, this is a privilege you to serve on the jury for this particular county. And then they gave us the ins and outs. Here's the restroom this way. There's actually a vending machine, but they had one in the jury rooms for us. They were told the cafeterias, you can go down and get breakfast if you like, this kind of thing. But you had to wear your jury tag at all times while you're in the courthouse, and when you're walking to your car.
Okay. Do you, during this time period, is anybody voicing annoyance or frustration, or do they look visibly annoyed for being there, or does everybody seem like they're on board?
Everybody seemed like they were on board, but you
Okay.
could see a little restlessness coming, about that hour and a half time frame before someone finally came in and started talking to us.
I think when we talked earlier, you'd also mentioned there was some type of video they had you on.
Yes.
What was that about?
Okay, so a representative from the court came in and said, you're going to see a short video. And so we watched a video with one of the circuit judges, explained to us, the importance of jury duty, how the process of being in a jury started. Don't ask me because I don't remember.
Yeah, no worries.
And then just showed us the process, showed, this is what you're going to do. This is where you're going to sit. This is where the defendant sits, the prosecution's on this side, what type of questions would be asked and what you were allowed to do and what you were not allowed to do. And it was probably a 15, 20-minute video.
Was there any direction that you're not allowed to go on the news or investigate or Google things, stuff like that?
That was not said in the jury room.
Okay.
Where we were, that was mentioned once you got to the next step of actually being in the courtroom.
Okay.
Then that was mentioned.
So let's fast forward.
It was mentioned on the video, but not by a court official to us at that point. It
was mentioned or it wasn't?
It was mentioned in the video.
Okay.
But it was not mentioned by a court official to us, in person.
So let's fast forward. You're walking through the double doors to get into the courtroom, and kind of play that by, tell us that story, what it's like, what are the attorneys doing, what are the other jurors doing, what's the feeling that you're experiencing as you're walking through? Okay,
so what happened? You're sitting there in the jury room, and then the bailiff comes in, and the bailiff introduces himself, and he says, there are two bailiffs that come in, and they said, we're going to call names. And when we call your name, raise your hand. And at our particular trial, it was a huge jury pool. So they chose 55 people
Mm-hmm.
And so what happens, you sit there, they call your name, you raise your hand, and when you raise your hand, they give you a number.
Mm-hmm.
And when you get that number, you are actually going into the courtroom. So
Mm-hmm.
then they line us up 1 through 55, and we're standing in the hallway just like you're going to the lunchroom in elementary school. You stand there, you walk in, and there's another bailiff there that's telling you where to sit. So the first 14 people that were called, numbers 1 through 14, they're your jury. That's who's going to be the jury.
They put you in the box, essentially.
They put you in the box.
Okay.
The first 14 people went in the box.
Okay.
The next 15 through 24 sat on the right side by the jury box.
Mm-hmm.
25 through 55 sat on the left side.
Mm-hmm.
And we sat there waiting there were a couple of things, administrative things that they had to do. So we sat there through that, and then the process started.
So when you're walking in, are you making eye contact with the attorneys? Who are you looking at? Anything from their style or presentation that struck you as good, odd, everything in between? Tips for us attorneys that maybe we need to be thinking about as you're walking in, or is it just so fast it doesn't matter?
No, it wasn't. It wasn't fast because you observe and you're watching. Because when I was back in the far back of the line from the number that I had, but when I got in, all the attorneys were standing facing the door, watching us walk in, and they kind of nodded their head, occasionally nod their head, this kind of thing to acknowledge us. The judge was actually sitting, on the bench and just watching us walk in. We all sat down and he welcomed us. And then who's the person we were sworn in by the bailiff?
Yes.
All 55 of us were sworn in. And then we sat down and stuff started.
They started asking questions.
Yeah.
And usually, if I recall correctly, judge asks a few questions. But and let's back up a little bit. You obviously found so to cut the story quickly, you were not selected for jury duty.
I was not selected for jury duty.
Okay. And this was a pretty serious case. It was a criminal murder trial, right?
That is correct.
Okay, so let's get with that context. At least the cases I've been involved in, the judge asks questions, and then the prosecutor, and then the defense. Is that the way it worked?
That is the way it worked, yes.
Okay, so tell me, walk us through kind of when the judge is asking questions, anything there that struck you as interesting or distracting or good or bad, everything in between?
As far as the judge was concerned, everything was good. He welcomed us. He thanked us. Because at this point, he's speaking to everybody because he doesn't know who's going to be pulled. He did make more eye contact, those 14 that were there, because those were the sitting jurors.
Yes.
And he thanked everyone, for coming and this type of thing. Then he told us what type of case it was. And then he stopped and said, does anyone have any concerns or issues about being on the jury with it being a murder trial? And several people raised their hands for different reasons, and they were excused.
Okay.
When
people are being excused, are you hearing what the discussion is, or are they getting pulled off to the side for the discussion?
It was both.
Okay.
It was both. There were some that just raised their hand and said, "Hey, look, it was as simple as I can't do blood."
Fair.
And the judge was very honest and said, "Hey, a lot of times we have a big jury to pull from, so I can let you go."
Okay.
And so there were some people that said, "I want to approach the bench privately."
As people are getting struck, and particularly ones that are getting pulled to the bench to have a separate discussion, are you as a juror thinking, "I wonder what they're talking about," or are you thinking, "I hope I'm not next"? Or what are you thinking as that process is happening?
At first, it was, gosh, I wonder what their excuse is. It was interesting because the young lady sitting next to me said, "I wonder what their excuse is so I can use it too." She didn't want to be there because most of the people, as a matter of fact, all of them who approached the bench or raised their hand were excused.
And that being said, did you get a sense from most of the people that didn't want to be there as you're sitting in the box, or not in the box, but as the jury selection is happening, or do you just not know?
Well, this is a very interesting question because of my job. I'm listening to the reasoning. I'm like, they just don't want to be here, because I'm tuned to that. So I'm listening. Oh, they just don't want to be here. There were some excuses like, that's not going to wash, and it did.
Okay.
But a lot of them were very valid. The judge, to be honest, the judge first came up to us and said, just to let you know, this is slated for a 2-week trial versus a week. Does anyone have any conflicts of being here 2 weeks? Well, there were a lot of people who had airline reservations, this kind of thing, and he immediately let them go.
Okay.
Doctor's appointments, he let you go. Childcare issues, because it was going longer, he let you go. And then that got rid of, a good 10, 15 people. Okay.
One question I always have, because I tend to do this, thanking the jury for their service, and, as you're opening your questioning of the jury for jury selection. How does that feel when an attorney says, thank you for your service, and the judge says, thank you to your service? Does it feel genuine, or does it feel fake, or does it matter?
It matters.
Okay.
It definitely matters. That thank you, it's a very small word, but it holds a lot.
Okay.
And you can see the sincerity in it. It's not just, I have it written down on a piece of paper. And this is for all three. It was for the judge, the prosecution, and the defense. You could really feel that they were thanking you for being there. And it felt heartfelt.
Okay. And that mattered.
Yes, that did.
Okay.
After sitting there for so long, that did matter. And what struck me was the prosecution stood up first. And the first thing he says, I know it's been a long morning for you. And he pointed to the defense and the judge. We apologize for that. And that went a long ways when you've been sitting there that long.
Yeah.
Which is huge. That is being sincere and thanking the jury is very, very important.
Okay. So, and with that being said, that's a segue into, let's talk about, and again, and just for anybody's watching this, the goal is not to disparage any attorneys or say we're better as the trial attorneys. I'm really wanting to focus on sharing your perspective of, as you're watching, being questioned by each party, kind of what's going through your head, things that stick out, things that are distracting, things that we as attorneys should do and things that we shouldn't do. So let's talk about the prosecution first. Any kind of 1,000-foot view thoughts on what that attorney is doing and how you're receiving that?
Because he started first, he, like I said, he thanked us, and he apologized for the long wait, and kind of explained there's certain things that we attorneys need to present in front of the judge, and this is our time to present it. Kind of explained that, which I thought was great. Explained that he could not go in front of the judge by himself. It had to be both he and the defense to go in front of the judge, and this was the best time to do that. So that kind of eased the angst about waiting when he took the time to explain that. The prosecution was he was very thorough. And I like the fact that he involved everyone. He didn't just talk to the 24 that he had on the right-hand side. He made it a point not to turn his back to the rest of us when he was talking. And if he asked a question, do you have a problem with the color red, so to speak? And if we raised our hands on that side, he acknowledged that. which kind of made you feel good. It made you feel like you're part of the process. The questions were you could. Oh, this is hard because I work, with you, but you could tell I could tell by the questions kind of where the prosecution was going with their case.
Yeah, yeah.
And I could tell by the questions the defense asked where they were going with their case.
Mm-hmm.
And so to me, some of the questions kind of repetitive. How many times can you ask me, do I have a gun in my house?
Yeah. Yeah.
That got kind of annoying. And then it did annoy one of the jurors. When the defense was asking that, he said, "Hey, look, you've asked me this question, same questions 3 times in 3 different ways. My answer is going to be the same."
Okay.
And you could tell that there was a little testiness there.
One of the things that I'm always concerned of is asking questions. We're kind of taught in law school, and even as we're trying cases, you kind of have your sets questions that everybody asks.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes, even if I'm doing them, I'm like, why am I asking this? One of the things is sometimes I'll just literally start asking people that haven't talked yet, Miss Smith, I haven't heard from you yet. Can you tell me a little about what you do and, a little bit about your background, just so I can kind of get something from them. Is that annoying? Do you perceive as a prospective juror that being annoying, that too many questions are being asked? Or can you appreciate that, hey, we're just trying not to mess it up kind of thing? Does that make sense?
You can appreciate it because it can get, no one's really talking. When the attorney's asking questions, it's like mostly yes or no questions. No one's really talking. They're looking at head nods. People are mostly nodding their heads. No one's saying yes or no. So when you as an attorney says, "Mrs. Brown, I haven't heard from you. Let me ask you, what do you do?" And when you show that interest, you can see the body language kind of change a little bit, because it's a natural thing when someone gets to talk about themselves, they become engaged again.
Okay.
And so I noticed that the prosecution at first, he kept the scan of the room, and he could see, someone kind of drifting off, and he would, he only used juror numbers. He did not call names. He just used numbers.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah. He said, juror number 23, haven't heard from you, so to speak. What do you do? What do you do for a living? And they would say, goes, "Oh, that's pretty interesting. Can you tell me a little more about that?" And immediately they get engaged and they're focused again. So I think it's very important to kind of watch your jury pool.
Yeah. And
if you see someone kind of gazing off or doodling and that kind of thing, to kind of bring them back.
That's interesting, because I've never even thought to use a juror number. Do you guys, like, on the lanyard have your number?
Yes, it's on the lanyard.
Okay.
And you don't get the number. The number that you get on your letter is a barcode. It's probably 5 or 6 numbers. Okay. Then once you're called, you get a printed number, like 25, 24, and you put that in front of the lanyard. You keep your juror thing that says juror on the back side and that number on the front, so they can see the number.
I mean, I can't recall, and you've been in most of my recent juries, I don't recall them doing that. Is that different than what we've experienced on?
That's different, and I think it was different because it was such a large jury pool, because the first thing the judge said was, "This is one of the biggest jury pools I've seen in a long time."
Do you know, do you have a sense of, if they give the numbers, is it better to use their names or their numbers? Does it matter? At least from your perspective. It may not matter. I don't know.
I don't think it. The prosecution did a really good job of explaining why he was going to use the numbers.
Oh, he did? Okay.
Yeah, he did. He said, it would take me longer to go look at my piece of paper and find this name. And then said, then I will probably mess your name up.
Interesting.
Which he got a nice chuckle.
Yeah.
I'll probably mess your name up. So he had a good explanation for using the numbers versus the names.
And as I think about it, for appellate purposes, it's probably better. It's easier for a transcript if it's like juror number 6 and who juror number 6 is.
Right.
That's interesting. Okay.
And it made it easier too when they were dismissing.
Yeah.
Also.
Yeah. Because I've always, the last presentation, like I went to a mock trial in Arlington or something, and they did that. And I was thinking, why don't they do this everywhere?
Yeah.
And why is it not just a matter of protocol, like for every, in fact, I may suggest that to some folks, but that's interesting. Anything, because this is this interview is a little bit longer than I thought it would be. Anything that was distracting for you from either side that you think that we need to know to avoid doing?
You and I talked about this, and I think one of the things is that what was the question again? I'm sorry.
Any big points that were distracting for you as a juror that you would want them to avoid? In particular, let's say we're trying a case next week, what would you be telling me not to do based upon what you saw?
As far as if you don't get the answer that you're looking for, I think it's so important not to keep on with that juror, because then it becomes a sense of you being accusatory.
Okay.
For lack of a better word. And then you see the juror kind of, shut down. If they tell you that I don't believe in using a gun for self-defense, then just take that. That's their belief. More than likely, you're not going to pick them anyway. So don't continue to ask them, well, why don't you? Because you're not only being what's the word I'm looking for? You're not only turning that juror off, you're turning off the other ones that's there listening to you do that. And I watched that firsthand, that the body language of the jurors that were chosen kind of changed a little bit. So just be kind of mindful of, if a person tells you that I don't do this, just kind of, okay, I'm more than likely not going to pick you anyway. So I'm not going to elaborate or ask you to elaborate on that.
Is there anything else that, from your experience, because you ended up not even getting on the box, right?
Right.
And they just dismissed you. Is there anything else that you think that anybody watching this, or again, next time we go to trial, we should be thinking about from the perspective of a juror?
I think more so just be mindful that one of the things, because I've been on both sides, be mindful of that jury is sitting there waiting when you're in the courtroom and you're doing your administrative time. I know that a lot of times the attorneys haven't seen each other, so you're like, hey, how are the kids? How's this going? But always keep in back of your mind, there are people that have given their time to come do this, and so save that kind of talk. If it's going to take a long time, save it for later on. Just be mindful of those people sitting back there waiting, and they're forming their own opinions as to why they're waiting, why they're sitting there.
Well, and you probably know this. It's not, a lot of times the time that jurors are waiting in the back is not because like me and defense counsel are playing or shooting the shit. It's because there's something that needs to get worked out, or the judge needs to do something, or we have an argument to make.
Right.
But that's interesting. So
I also think that there should be someone from the courtroom coming in and telling, not just saying that it's they're doing administrative stuff. Hey, look, something came up with this trial, and they are, if it can be done, and they're working through this issue, and we'll be with you shortly. But just have you sit there for an hour and a half to 2 hours and not tell you anything, but it's just administrative.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's only so much as the litigants that we can do to communicate to the jury. But that is interesting perspective, because even as we're trial attorneys prepping cases, it lends to, are there issues that can be, let's say there's a litigation issue, maybe we could do a pretrial motion rather than trying to have it on the day of court to be argued,
Right.
stipulations of certain things.
But we also know that stuff does come up at the last minute.
Yeah. Okay. Well, look, this is super interesting. I think I'm hopeful this was useful to people watching. It definitely is helpful for me, and hopefully us as a team as we're coming into our next situation. But so for anybody that has questions for Sharon, I'm just going to go ahead and put our information back up there. This is my email address, but you can get to www.abreniolaw.com. And if you have a question for Sharon, you can shoot me an email and I'll forward it to her. But look, Sharon, I appreciate you taking the time.
Sure.
If it helps just one person maybe get a little bit of sleep at night or helps the presentation go a little bit better, I'm glad we took the time. So thank you for that.
Can I say one more thing though? As far as when you get your letter, make sure you read the entire letter, because if you do have a conflict, if you do it in time, there is a website or a phone number you can call and ask that you not serve on this jury, and they will actually put you on the next jury that comes up.
Cool.
And then once you've served, whether you're in the jury box or not, you show up at court and they scan your number. You do not have to do jury duty again for 3 years.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Whether you serve or not.
Okay. Awesome.
So that's, look, so, it's few couple of days of your time, you only have to do it once every 3 years.
Yeah. And if a prospective juror is watching this just because they want more information and don't know what to do, I would just encourage you. It is fundamental to our system, both criminal and civil, to have jurors willing to serve. It's a really cool experience. I know that you got work to do and all that and family obligations, but to serve on a jury doesn't happen often. And it is the best way to learn about our judicial system. More than any class you're going to get is to actually sit through a trial and do your duty as a citizen. So take those summonses seriously and don't just be thinking, how do I get out of it? Think about what you can get from it. So, all right, Sharon, appreciate it.
Sure, James. Take care.